What motivated you to write this book?
A love of the Jesus story, as I said. Love the story since I was a kid. Just like so many people, totally captured my imagination. It's really the founding story or mythic story of our whole Western culture. I think it still dominates our culture, even though sort of Christianity as a whole doesn't dominate the culture like it did 500 years ago, but still you just feel it everywhere in the culture. But personally it was something that totally captured my imagination. I was taken by the story. I was taken by, when I was a kid, sort of the magical quality, as children love sort of magical things. And it also had a real, probably more than anything, it really it connected me to the magic, I would think, of existence. Just that feeling of sacredness, you know, and even for me, like every Christmas would roll around. And about 2 months before Christmas, I always felt like I would enter into this different domain, almost like into a Harry Potter movie. Yeah, but it would just start, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like the whole atmosphere, the energy of the land, of the space we're in, just sort of would alter, and I could feel it. And it would bring me in this place that felt very, very, very sacred. And it would start a couple months before Christmas, and it would last for at least a month afterwards. So it was like a 3-month window. And it still happens to me to this day. There's like this 3-month window that's sort of extra extraordinary. And to me, that was always tied in with this amazing story of this amazing being. So it's that feeling, I think, more than anything that has captured me.
Since your awakening and since you became very busy as a spiritual teacher, had you really had much time to put your attention on the story of Jesus and give it much thought, or was this like a real discovery adventure for you, researching and writing this book? Did you kind of like, all kinds of ahas came to you that you hadn't really thought about before?
Sure, kind of both. Kind of both. I mean, I really got into the whole Christian mystical sort of tradition probably in my mid-20s, you know, after I'd been doing Zen for 4 or 5 years. When, you know, in your 20s, 4 or 5 years seems like forever, especially if you're doing Zen, because it can be so difficult. But I felt something was missing, something I couldn't connect with, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to find it. I didn't know where to search for it. But I started to see it in these books of the Christian mystics. And when I was in my mid-20s, I just started devouring books. I mean, probably 200 books, all of the Christian mystics. And only in retrospect, you know, like looking back in the rearview mirror, we're all so much wiser than we are at the present. But looking back, I could see that what it did was connect me to the Sacred Heart, to the spiritual heart, which I couldn't find in Zen. Now I can see that it was there, but it wasn't there as a Westerner in a way that was easy for me to access. Yeah. You know, even the idea of compassion, to my way of being, wasn't a way I could feel compassion, but it didn't get me into sort of the spiritual heart. It didn't really open the whole thing up. And then just reading some of these mystics, it was almost like entering into that 3 months of magic again. That I could open those books, read St. Therese, St. John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, and many, many others, and all of a sudden it would be. So that's what started.
We were talking in the car on the way up about how in certain Buddhist traditions, maybe predominantly, there's very little talk of God, and actually a number of prominent Buddhists proclaim themselves as atheists, you know, and we were kind of speculating as to why that is, and whether Buddhism, at least as those people practice it, only took you so far, and that there's a whole other range of possibilities, which I think you're alluding to now, which involve the heart and more refined perception and, you know, deeper appreciation of God's creation and of God himself or himself.
I think, to me, the Christian, at least for me, because I don't like to make general statements, because the way people interact with their traditions is very unique to them, but for me, I think of the best of the Christian tradition as a kind of enlightened duality.
What do you mean by that?
And I mean that in the very best sense. I mean that as a tradition, of course, the mystics go beyond that, beyond any kind of duality, or a lot of them go right beyond any duality. But I think one of its gifts, and its gifts is a very needed gift in the world of non-duality sort of spirituality, is that, you know, our minds kind of get so stuck on these hierarchies. Like, non-duality is better than duality. Really? Where is that written?
And what's that? Duality.
Right, and what's that? Exactly. You know, and here we are, right? We call this duality. But to me, like, an enlightened duality is, I guess, to me, I could summarize it really simply, is when you see and feel and experience everything you see, taste, touch, feel, is God. And, you know, in the radical non-dual circles, that the world is sort of is called an illusion,
right.
like something that's a dream. Right. And that has a legitimacy too, because contemplatives for thousands of years have had these experiences where the world does seem like a dream, does seem comparatively to some deeper state of being of very little importance, and that's very freeing and very liberating. But the other side is, like, the completion of that insight is when you see it's also absolutely God. Not as a philosophy or a theology, but you actually experience it that way. And that's, to me, you could talk about that, I suppose, in lots of use different language, but to see everything as God, or as Ramana Maharshi might see everything as the self, whatever language works for you, to me, that's what I mean when I say enlightened duality. You know, it's the seeing duality for what it really is. It's divine. This whole thing where we call some parts real and some parts unreal, it's a convention of our human minds. It doesn't actually exist out here in life. There's not things that are, you know, a tree is real or not real. I mean, these are ways that I think we confuse ourselves. Mm-hmm.